If you've been around Destiny long enough, you're familiar with the terms one step forward, two steps back. And the Witch Queen might have exemplified this more than any other DLC. You find yourself in one of two boats. Either you absolutely hate every single change Bungie makes, or you love everything presented to you. Me, I find myself in the middle. In this video, we'll try to take the most objective stance possible. I know that's impossible, because even taking a stance is not objective. This video will be discussing the Witch Queen and the seasons that came with the Witch Queen. Nothing more, nothing less. There's been a lot of great changes going into Lightfall, but that's a whole separate discussion. And one of my favorite parts of the Witch Queen were the raids. So...
Raid Shadow Legends.
Raid is my guilty pleasure when I'm not grinding Destiny. Raid is some super tough bosses to go up against for my raiders. A poison and fiery dragon, a giant fire knight reminding me of this guy in Destiny, an ice golem who will freeze you and make you mash buttons to get unthawed. Reminds me of something. The spider queen who I still can't beat, and the charged up and angry minotaur. Raid's got a ton of cool events to jump into this month too. There's the Forge Pass Season 7, more events where you can earn anniversary points as a part of the 3-month-long 4th Anniversary Titan event, various Valentine's Day activities for you loved up summoners, and more. Love is in the air, and even in the world of Raid, new players can enjoy a special Valentine's Day themed adventure with the Raid Love Quest. All you need to do to get involved is download Raid Shadow Legends from the link down below. Copy your in-game player ID and head to raidlovequest.plarium.com. Enter your player ID and set out on this heartfelt quest, running from February 14th to March 14th. Play one of the Valentine's Day themed minigames for a chance to win some fantastic in-game and real-life prizes, including Valentine's Day themed raid champions and even Amazon gift cards worth up to $1,000. If you're an existing raid player, you can still share the love too. Go to raidlovequest.plarium.com to find a special promo code that everyone can use to get a small Valentine's Day gift from them to you. But there's more. New players can use my link or scan the QR code right here and get a free starter pack with this cool in-game loot. Thanks to Raid for sponsoring this video. On February 22nd of 2022, Bungie was about to open the floodgates of the Witch Queen. This DLC set up the Guardian vs. Savathun, an antagonist teased and an integral part of the overarching plot of Destiny for 7 years. She was a story in the main plot lines like Red War and its sunset location Titan. The biggest DLC for Destiny 2 Forsaken as the true villain pulling the strings. Multiple seasons afterwards that would all lead into the Witch Queen and, well, you get my point. She was a big deal for Destiny players. The proof is in the concept. The Witch Queen, as of recording this video, has over 8 million views on its debut trailer, garnered over 1 million pre-orders, and upon release, earned massive praise for its legendary campaign, with peak viewership on Twitch and YouTube not seen since Forsaken's launch 4 years prior, and 5 million new Guardians starting their journey. 2022 was shaping up to be a return to form for the franchise. Fast forward to the end of the year, and Destiny 2 has reported the lowest player count since being available on Steam, and community sentiment is at an all-time low. So what happened? What possible series of events could have led to the largest DLC in Destiny 2's history to fall this far from grace? Did the Witch Queen really make Destiny worse, or do we all just need to go touch some grass? This video will serve as a time capsule for the expansion, just like the other retrospectives available on my channel. So if you somehow missed this DLC, logged off after the first 2 weeks, or didn't hear about some of the year's dramatic stories, this recap will go over the successes and failures of the Witch Queen to discover whether or not it was worth buying. Should be easy, right? You see, I believe that for every single Destiny player, from new lights to day one raiders, this year has objectively been a low point for the community, and the challenges discussed in this video will only support that fact. Yes, there were high highs, but there were lower lows. So let's begin unpacking this monumental expansion as it happened to find out just where it all went wrong, and answer the question, did the Witch Queen make Destiny worse? The Witch Queen story was met with critical and community acclaim as a return to form for Bungie, with their signature Halo-style mission structure unlike that of most other Destiny DLCs. Laced with epic moments, jaw-dropping set pieces, atmospheric environments, and a compelling main villain, the campaign was everything fans anticipated after years of Savathûn hype throughout the series. Without spoiling too much or talking for a year on the story, a quick summary is in order. The player finds a disturbance on Mars when Eris, Keitel, and Ikora get invaded by Savathûn's gigantic ship. We investigate, then are met with Savathûn's light-bearing hive. Wait, how did she get the light? Well, Ikora Rey explains what players already knew if they played the previous season. Savathûn possessed Osiris, the time-walking warlock who had the inside scoop on everything going on in our story. Through this, she learned all of our secrets, eventually making a trade for the removal of her worm familiar for Osiris's freedom. At the conclusion of the previous season, players watched Savathûn get away with it, but we had no way to explain how she stole the light. Some theorized that she stole Osiris's ghost, corrupting it in some way, but that was left to interpretation. After Ikora explains this, we set out to explore Savathûn's throne world with a brand new ability, Deep Sight, learning a lot more backstory about the history of the Hive and Savathûn herself. Along the way, we make a most unlikely ally, a Hive ghost named Finch, who wants to help us for, no clue why this ghost wants to help us. I think everyone was skeptical of his allegiances at first, but nothing else really happened there. Finch tells the Guardian to investigate Xivu Arath's temple in the throne world, where they manage to find the shell of Osiris's ghost Sagira. Upon recovering Sagira's shell, the Guardian's deep sight power triggers a psychic imprint, which reveals an old memory of Savathûn talking about a mysterious being called the Witness. We use deep sight to go back to the icy Jovian moon, Europa, and see what's up with the pyramid ship that we never got to visit in the previous expansion, Beyond Light. Using deep sight, the player uncovers more memories of Savathûn connected via Osiris's ghost. But it all just seems a little too deliberate for the Hive God of Trickery to leave such a big relic within her throne world. This memory reveals that the Witness is the entity who controls the darkness, and that Savathûn had used her time in disguise as Osiris to learn something critical about the light. Finch contacts the Guardian again to fight a fan-favorite Hive badass a la Cool, the once Darkblade turned light as a new strike boss, and recover a piece of the Tablets of Ruin, which were used by Oryx to create the Taken. Returning to the memory room, the Guardian recovers a second memory from Savathûn, where she reveals that the Witness has the power to move worlds between different realities, and that she intends to move the Traveler to her throne world and seal it away. The Guardian follows up on another lead from Finch and travels to the Temple of Sethona. Inside, we find a statue of Sethona cradling a worm, which is in fact Savathûn's recently removed worm familiar. While attempting to remove the worm, we spring an illusionary trap of the Wish Dragon Riven. We narrowly escape with Savathûn's worm familiar in hand. Ikora and Zavala have a heated conversation, but Eris says,
"Yo, what up?"
and tells the Guardian to find a crystal for Mara Sov, which was part of Mara's spell to imprison Savathûn in the Dreaming City during the season prior. The Guardian recovers the shard and enters the memory room once more. In the newly uncovered memory, the story's first major plot twist is revealed. Savathûn, after going through the exorcism ritual for her worm familiar at the hands of Mara Sov in the Dreaming City, eventually made her way to Earth, and died on the outskirts of the last city, gazing upon the Traveler she calls friend. In reply, and to the surprise of every player, the Traveler sends a Hive ghost to resurrect her willingly. Savathûn then appears before the Guardian in the memory room, thanking them for helping her remember her past life, before attempting to kill them. The Guardian escapes and returns to the tower, where they attend a meeting with the Vanguard and brief Zavala on the revelation that the recovered worm may be the key. Ikora then takes the familiar to the relic on Mars, revealing a memory that would shock players and their understanding of the world of Destiny. In the memory, a young Sethona stands on her homeworld of Fundament, with the worm gods in the water below and a newly arrived Traveler in the sky above. This reveals that the Traveler prepared to grant the Proto-Hive a golden age, as it would later do for the Fallen and humanity. The memory depicts the Witness, through the worm familiar, coming up with a plan to trick Sethona and her sisters, Arash and Zero, into freeing the worm gods by framing the Traveler for an imminent cataclysm, leading to the birth of the Hive as we know them, and the ascension of Sethona, Arash, and Zero into the Hive gods Savathûn, Oryx, and Xivu Arath. Ikora tells us we need to stop Savathun with the information we have learned. We kill all the connections to pull the Traveler in, and then unveil Sathona's memory, which confuses and enrages Savathun. We trick the Queen of Tricks. Savathun smugly warns the Guardian and the Ghost that the Witness is coming, and then she dies. But her ghost Amaru gets away, and poof, Witness cutscene. The Witch Queen campaign was a great mesh of locations through it, and all in all, a solid first-time experience with a clear beginning, middle, and conclusion, with plot twists galore. Set pieces like being launched out of a cannon, the escape out of Sathona's temple, and the epic environment leading into the final fight set a new standard for story missions. Introductions of the Light Hive were incredible at whooping players down a notch, and some bosses in the story felt like newly added challenge, providing players a sample of the endgame enemies for those who don't really play that content. The story had some major plot twists that shifted how longtime lore fans look at Savathun, and for new players, it clearly established why we should care about the Witch Queen's legacy. Savathun may or may not have died. It's an opening for future return, and in true Destiny fashion, players got a tease at the threat of an even bigger enemy in the future. The enemy we've been building towards since the very beginning. The campaign is a massive step forward for Destiny, especially on the harder difficulty, and it was the main talk of the Witch Queen's promotional material. But it's not flawless the way people will tell you. In fact, it was an unsolvable problem before it released. Bungie may have done a pretty good job with the story, but since Savathun had been discussed for years and has been a threat looming in the background since her brother died in 2015's Taken King in the raid, she's been hyped for those 7 years. With that amount of stories piling, the lore built around this character, the years of teasing the character, every major threat in Destiny seemingly being a pawn in her game, you would think this character would be popping up everywhere in Destiny throughout 2022. Bungie's creative director said, quote, "If you like games with standalone campaigns like Doom, Titanfall 2, God of War, and Halo, then the Witch Queen is for you." Expectations were exceedingly high, and the clear impression Bungie gave players was that Savathun wasn't just going to be another stepping stone villain in the story like so many before her, and she was gone in a day. Don't get me wrong, the campaign was still really good. I wouldn't go as far as to say God of War or Doom level, but better than anything Destiny players have ever received by a country mile. Savathun will no doubt be back, as the player was trained the whole campaign to learn you crush Hive ghosts to kill the Light Hive, and Savathun's ghost is still alive, but the story of the Witch Queen was hurt by the surrounding entities of Destiny's vision. That will be a recurring theme throughout this video, and if you look at the roadmap of expansions Bungie has laid out in a pseudo-Marvel Cinematic Universe form, you'd already know she's a stepping stone. These aren't issues with the campaign, but instead how you like stories presented. And for me, I don't like knowing what's next years before it happens. My criticisms come less from the story beats and more from the pure gameplay, because while I found the main story to be solid, I found the main gameplay of the missions to not offer enough new for me to be hooked for multiple playthroughs. But that's the thing, right? I have to do all 3 playthroughs on Legendary, or I don't get the exotics from that season, and I can't get the level bumps I need for day 1 raiding. The gameplay loop suffers from being too linear for its own good. Nakey Jakey made a great video on Rockstar's game philosophy, controlling the player way too much, that by even going off-road for more than a step, it can make a mission fail. Destiny has a great sandbox of weapons to choose from, and abilities to shine, but it also tells me constantly to slow it down for fear that my loadouts may be too good on a boss. Instead of adding more health or a high risk, high reward mechanic, all of the bosses, I mean all of them, have health gates, where I need to stop doing what I'm doing, interact with an object of some kind, then I can resume a boss fight that will have me doing the same mundane task to eventually kill the same bosses. It begins to feel more like loading screens and less like an engaging, live-like room of enemies. It's just been overdone too much for its own good, and the creativity absolutely needs to shine again on gameplay the way it did for the story. This led to my second and third time through the campaign to be a chore, since I already knew the plot twist from my first run-in with the campaign. More thought needed to be put into how evergreen this approach was going to be, since replaying the missions became a materials and leveling incentive later down the road, especially given that Destiny's sandbox is filled with some incredible weapons and abilities. There's not really much else to say on the campaign. It was mostly good, maybe a little overhyped, and definitely misleading on the Doom, Titanfall, God of War, True Detective level story comparisons. Early in the campaign, players were presented with a brand new experience and a brand new weapon in the world of Destiny, crafting their very first glaive. Weapon crafting being introduced into the game was a huge selling point for the DLC, promising a clear path of acquiring the desired god roll weapons and limiting the amount of vault space taken up by less than perfect weapons. Sounds like just what we need, right? Well, the reality that quickly dawned on players after release was that weapon crafting failed to meet expectations. They actually made the vault situation worse. The glaive itself was a key pillar of the Witch Queen marketing material, featured throughout trailers and TWABs leading up to the release. A combination of melee and ranged offense and defense, the glaive was an evolution from previously introduced swords in the Witch Queen's sibling DLC, the Taken King, and allowed the player to use the weapon in first person. The general feedback was that the customization of glaives were less than stellar, and the weapon was only viable with very specific mod and perk combos. Additionally, the exotic variations of class-specific glaives attainable through RNG-heavy quests were even more underwhelming and underperforming. I'd love to see a buff to these exotic glaives in the future, because right now, they hit like a wet noodle. To craft a weapon, you needed a combination of materials that were a bit of a slog to earn, and the coveted red border weapons that unlocked the various weapon patterns for crafting. Instead of providing a path to earn god roll weapons, we were left with a hope and a prayer that we would earn enough red border weapons from drops, sometimes on weekly lockouts, to eventually craft what we were chasing in the first place. To add to the confusion, some red borders weren't even craftable frames. They were attunable to earn craftable materials and nothing more. Either way, red borders were incredibly rare to drop at launch, and after feedback, Bungie buffed the drop rate to the point that players' vaults were stacked up with red borders too valuable to dismantle. So let's say you were lucky enough to get enough red borders for your chase weapon, and enough materials for its construction. Time to finally craft that god roll you've been wanting, right? Not so fast. If you wanted some of the more rare weapon perks, you had to level up a basic version of the crafted weapon first. And if you wanted any of the enhanced perks, unobtainable on regular weapon drops, you had to progress a weapon a lot. So what's the best way to level up a weapon? Is it A, take the weapon into a raid, vanquishing one of the bosses? B, completing a long list of seasonal challenges or triumphs? C, finishing one of the master level activities with the weapon? Or D, farming Taken in the Last Wish raid at Shuro-Chi? This is Destiny. Of course it's going to be D. I'm sure Bungie thought we'd just take the weapons with us along our regular adventures, but in a game of balancing time-demanding grinds, efficiency is king. So we all just shared the boss checkpoints until we could forge our god roll. The final piece of the puzzle is that craftable weapons add to power creep. Enhanced perks are without equal, which means not only are your non-craftable versions uncompetitive, but also any activity that provides red borders are useless once you've learned the weapon patterns. Even adept weapons, earned from nightfalls and master raids, they can't compete with crafted weapons since they don't come with enhanced perks. Simply put, weapon crafting took away incentive for some of the highest difficulty activities in the game. Bungie said time and time again that they would have to be careful with their crafting system. After a year, some of these problems may seem only apparent for content creators and people that have a bunch of time to get some of these weapons. However, I find that every single player will eventually run into these issues, and you hit the wall, and eventually, crafting will feel like just another grind to suck some time instead of being a rewarding experience. It feels like crafting has just become another grind to consume time. Some of these challenges could have been mitigated if crafting was limited to things like seasonal weapons, or perhaps some returning fan favorites. Instead, every season it's a race to get the latest red border weapons in order to grind out their enhanced perks, killing any desire to play endgame content beyond getting your guaranteed minimum 2 red border weapons a week. A number of core activities were added with the Witch Queen's launch, like Wellspring, a 6-player activity that rotated between attack and defend mode, moving either forwards or backwards through a Throne World mission area, earning players some weapons that frankly were just worse than what was already obtainable elsewhere. Also added, the Altars of Savathûn, A string of short weekly story missions unlocking her memories, along with a few lore-enticing games of 2 truths, 2 lies. These were really cool. I gotta say, I kinda like these. The Vanguard Strike playlist was expanded with 2 new additions. While they're a welcomed addition, the main problem with Strike editions is the continued lack of Strike-specific loot. Why make these unique bosses and environments if you're not going to give players something special to grind for? Prime example, back in the Taken King, where certain Strike bosses like the Darkblade could drop a unique helmet. Hell, one of the new Strike bosses is a direct sequel to that very same Strike. Now, the Lightblade. And the loot pool is Vanguard gear. This lack of chase means that players willingly opt out of longer strikes and battlegrounds in order to finish their weekly Vanguard bounties and activity completions in shorter strikes. Why this hasn't been addressed after years of feedback is really beyond me. One massive improvement that began with the Witch Queen's launch was the massive overhaul to the light subclasses that have been largely unchanged since Forsaken. In an attempt to make each subclass feel akin to the stasis system introduced in Beyond Light, Witch Queen would add Void 3.0, which would be followed up by Solar and Arc in subsequent seasons. With each overhaul, players were excitingly build crafting into the new possibilities. And I would say the changes have largely expanded the variety of endgame builds available. There are still some updates needed, especially with the way in which the new subclasses interact with some exotic armor pieces. And no doubt there will be some balancing challenges with the second Darkness subclass, Strand. The only downside, if I'm really being nitpicky here, and well, it's that time of the year, that by establishing class diversity, it only made the classes feel a little bit more samey. Since now Titans and Warlocks can get trip mines, everybody can have storm nades, including Titan's insane arc builds. It's not that it's a bad thing, it's that class diversity has actually made classes feel more the same than ever. The last 2 components to address, and the 2 things this channel loves above all, are the raid and dungeon additions that came with the Witch Queen era. The brand new raid shortly after launch, Vow of the Disciple, was a freaking banger. Outside of the day 1 experience. Yeah, this race for World's First did not go well, and you should definitely check out my video covering that drama, but even with the wild story of crashes and bugs, Vow was an amazing raid with an incredibly unique final boss, Rolk, the first disciple of the Witness. As the year progressed, we explored the haunting memoir of a now indoctrinated Callus in the dungeon duality, but nothing was as haunting as the damn Bell of Conquest bugging out. I'm sure it'll be fixed one day, but apart from that, the dungeon was filled with some pretty great lore and even better loot. In similar fashion to last year, Bungie would add a returning raid halfway through 2022. In this case, the long-awaited sibling DLC raid from the Taken King, King's Fall. This is one of the best raids in Destiny's archive, and its return was truly special in both the mechanical updates, the day 1 experience, and the loot. I just wish the crafting system didn't render the weekly raid experience kinda pointless after you got the red borders. And I wish Master was worth your time, seeing the lowest amount of people get the title that we've ever seen. Finally, the last season of the year, Season of the Seraph, added the Spire of the Watcher dungeon. And I mean, it's pretty good. The lack of bugs, simple mechanics, and ease of replayability made for a good dungeon experience for new players to Destiny's endgame of PvE, and I can't really complain about the loot when it looks like this. But I do feel like the Season of the Haunted and Duality dungeon might have fit better leading up to the launch of Lightfall, since Callus is the main villain. The raid and dungeon content still stands out as the pinnacle of Destiny's PvE, and this year definitely kept players happy in that respect. But I don't like the charged season passes and dungeon keys in an already expensive game. So that about covers all of the inclusions that came with the Witch Queen. A memorable, if not replayable, campaign, a somewhat misguided weapon crafting system, the long overdue overhaul in Light 3.0, glaives, 2 strikes, a fantastic new raid, and a couple of new activities for powerful rewards. But once you've experienced all of these things, we have to play the rest of the game. And that's where players begin to worry. You see, there's typically a big drop-off in daily active users after the first few weeks of a DLC launch. And I can't help but feel that this is because Bungie didn't build into new additions as the year progressed. I was over the Throne World destination after about a week or two. That's really bad when you're talking about a DLC of this magnitude. The subsequent seasons this year didn't see us returning to the area either, making the whole destination feel like its purpose is only for the Witch Queen's story. Major expansions for MMOs like Destiny should be seen as major updates to the core of the game's current content, so any deviation away from it feels unwelcome. Look back to Season of the Hunt, which accompanied the launch of Beyond Light, a complete disconnect from all the new additions in Europa. Likewise, players just weren't feeling the activities outside of the Witch Queen. This can also be seen in the introduced enemies of the DLC, the Light-bearing Hive. Just like the stasis-wielding Fallen in Beyond Light, these welcome additions to the enemies of Destiny were now nowhere to be found outside of the Witch Queen. For 3 expansions in a row now, the newly added areas and activities have been restricted to being relevant for the first month or so of an expansion's release, left to gather dust once the next season rolls around. The Haunted Moon of Shadowkeep, the Icy Wastes of Europa, and the mysterious Throne World of Savathûn all feel irrelevant in Destiny's fast-paced content delivery, a far cry from the depth and richness that areas like the Dreadnought and the Dreaming City brought to the game previously. Back in Forsaken, even something like a new wanted enemy from Spider were scattered around lost sectors and every single planet existing, and there were even rare exotics tied to this side content like the Lord of Wolves. Now, Shadowkeep did do a little bit to help on this by adding the haunted enemies and lost sectors, but there was nothing to really chase in these lost sectors, the way that Forsaken added legendary drops. In the Witch Queen, we got a destination vendor, Finch, where we could grind reputation for upgrades to unlock more deep sight in the Throne World. Even if you exclude the fun chest exploit at launch for quick reputation grinds, this vendor screen is eerily reminiscent of the token system from vanilla Destiny 2. Something else is too. Before you go writing in the comments that Bungie didn't set these lofty expectations, it's the community's fault! Let me direct you to one of the leads at Bungie.
We've got more Destiny coming this year than any other year before. It's one of the most ambitious releases we've ever put together, and the team is firing on all cylinders.
So if you bought the Witch Queen in hopes of a year bigger than any before, well, that's not really what we got. There has been a decent amount of content introduced in this year's seasons, but it's weighed down by a model that feels stale and uninventive. This feedback isn't new by any means, and Bungie even outlined a full state of the game in early 2021 to address issues of sunsetting, leveling, and endgame incentives. They even delayed the Witch Queen's original release from November 2021 to February 2022 to ensure these changes led to the best experiences. But honestly, it just feels like more of the same, if not less engaging than last year. It's not that these activities were offensively bad, it's that they stayed stale enough that they failed to reinvent the wheel on anything. They just followed a formula that's already been done many times. I would say majority of players were hoping for something new with the Witch Queen, but that's just not what they got. Bungie even stated that over 5 million new Guardians joined the ranks this year, but now at the end of the year, we can see that attracting new players hasn't resulted in higher daily active users. Yes, more people have started to play Destiny this year, but it looks like more people have stopped playing too. I think it's fair to say that the finger is squarely pointed at the seasonal model, and this year it's gone from bad to worse. Seasons were originally meant to evolve the game, introducing smaller updates of content that built into the overall universe, expanding stories that might not get featured in a major DLC. Back in Forsaken, the core of the game felt great, and the DLC's content was being enjoyed simultaneously with the newly added seasonal content. Nowadays, it feels like each new season kills any desire to grind previous seasonal content, and takes us further away from the Witch Queen's content that the seasons were meant to support. Bungie has stated that sunsetting is going away in Lightfall. However, sunsetting of the seasons is not going away. And while I believe the devs at Bungie work incredibly hard, I do believe that this content being made to be sunset means that the content is more disposable than ever before. Swetsicle, the guy living upstairs from me, made a really good point in his video discussing concerns with Destiny.
Another thing that is incredibly confusing to me, and I'm going to call out Bungie for this, there was a big dilemma when Bungie split from Activision talking about how they were being overworked and pushed to meet these deadlines that weren't like physically possible. So Bungie come out and saying, oh, they're pushing us to all these deadlines is incredibly hypocritical, because since Bungie has left Activision, they have continued basically the same cycle. 4 seasons per year and 1 big expansion.
I often refer to SkillUp's review of Vanilla Destiny 2 when discussing the state of the game throughout the years. Bungie starts with a vision, and they go with it. But if the players want change, you have to wait a year to see any development catch up to the game. This mentality carries a lot of issues, as the inability to react to player feedback swiftly means that players feel stagnant while waiting to be heard. Bungie recognized this problem and evolved their mentality into what we have today, something which they have coined the train station mentality. During a presentation earlier this year, Justin Truman, Destiny 2's general manager, gave an Insight at Game Developers Conference 2022 titled From Box Production to Live Service, How Destiny 2 Changed Bungie. It's a really long read, but it gives insight into the shift in the way Bungie develops and delivers content to the Destiny player base. And it reflects the changes in feedback too. The challenges throughout Destiny 1 and 2, before the seasonal model was introduced, were centered around building expansions to address a year's worth of feedback in an attempt of creating these perfect experiences. But this would only result in hit or miss decisions that players would have to live with for months. Truman made this analogy of building trains that players inhabit for a time, but eventually abandon when shine begins to fade. In order to keep players, Bungie would shift to building train stations rather than trains. This is what the seasonal model is. And from the presentation, Bungie is really happy with the way it's working. Quote, our seasons in Destiny are the best they have ever been. So are our expansions. And our seasons got there quicker, despite being under much tighter schedule constraints. But that also means, to keep the station running, you need to let trains go out the door that carry risk on them you might not be comfortable with, or that have things you know you could fix if you just backed up the whole station for a few weeks and did a heroic savings throw on. While this presentation was back during Season 16, players have only recently heard these revelations and are understandably upset at the apparent lack of concern with dropping daily active users and general fatigue throughout the community. These statements would also go on to explain how some bugs have remained unfixed for so long, despite echoing complaints season to season, as Bungie prioritizes the next train of content over fixing anything delivered previously. This is even more confusing when you think about their original reasoning behind their split from their publishing partnership with Activision, stating that they didn't want to be stressed about putting so much content out. The community has been providing feedback since the accelerated seasons and Beyond Light, but no matter how much we complain, we're still met with the same formula. In fact, seasons have become more frustrating in more ways as time goes on. And before somebody in the comments says, well, just take a break and come back, I have played less Destiny than I ever have this year, but when I return, these frustrations are still met. Here's a quick rundown of this year's entries. At launch, with Season of the Risen, we had the all too familiar 2-tiered activities added. 1. A story-driven mission with weekly unlockable progression, and 2. A match-made activity to grind out a seasonal material or resource. These 2 activities provided the components to use inside a quest-like seasonal artifact that allowed us to unlock more loot as the season progressed. We also unlocked seasonal perks on a now infamous 3x7 vendor grid that changes certain features of the 2 weekly activities. That formula has remained mostly unchanged for 2 full years now. And with the Witch Queen's issues of power creep, weapon crafting, and a lack of interest in challenging content, don't get me started on the state of PvP, Destiny's seasons have turned player fatigue into a coma. Season of the Haunted would release with almost no promotion, only a few trailers 24 hours before they began, and a lot of people wonder what was the cause of all the secrecy. It followed the exact same formula as before, added some interesting character developments in the story, but it was far from groundbreaking. It did, however, break the air. Good one. Without too much warning, airborne effectiveness was announced as a newly added stat to aid in balancing concerns in PvP. In a bizarre direction, Bungie took a key component of the way we played Destiny and turned it on its head, making our guns fire like a Salvador Dali painting, flopping around with no accuracy if we were even slightly in the air, leading to some of the most frustrating gunfights possible.
Dude, that sound is loud.
Zone C captured. Enemy claimed Zone A. Enemy claimed Zone B.
You what?
Titan lines up the shot, but almost tried to aim too hard there.
Oh, yeah.
But he's going to give the jump shot a try. I guess we're just testing.
Oh.
And
Lagging?
what?
Shut it down. Shut it down. That's it.
Okay.
Now, to combat this, Bungie decided to actually add a new Crucible map instead of just vaulting the old ones, this time set in Savathun's throne world. It's not exactly an instant classic, but I enjoy that it's in the game, and I'm really happy that Bungie is adding some form of Crucible support, but it's alright, I guess. Season of the Plunder would arrive with the probable reason that airborne effectiveness was added: Strand, grapple hooks. Season of the Plunder would arrive with a massive change to skill-based matchmaking in PvP, and no matter where you landed on the skill versus connection debate, it was exceedingly harsh to penalize players for leaving even the most casual quick play matches, leading to more annoying games and providing more reason to avoid the Crucible altogether. Bungie gave us the new and improved Rift game mode, with a round-based system that had some issues of its own, and a returning Crucible map, Cathedral of Dusk. It's worth mentioning that by the launch of the Witch Queen, it had been 6 seasons since a new map was brought to PvP, the most recent being 3 maps we got with Season of the Worthy years ago. But I mean, come on, this is Bungie, the people who gave us the modern day ranking system all the way back in Halo 2. How is this good enough? Beyond PvP, Season of the Plunder only grew player fatigue, with one of 2 introduced activities being a tedious and slow watered down public event, and some seasonal challenges being frustratingly difficult to complete in the other match-made activity. Even the fun little world event with Telesto acting up felt like a cruel tease to a community hungry for the secret missions so famously loved throughout Destiny's history. This was only made worse with Joe Blackburn, Bungie's game director, going out to say,
"We're long past the era of content droughts. Instead, there are exciting story and events happening in Destiny almost every week, year-round. And we're not slowing down."
The more passionate player base would pick up and put down seasonal content faster than before. New players from the Witch Queen became uninterested as the year went on. And new lights? Well, they got this mission. You guys want to see the goofiest one? Now you may wonder, Evan, what the hell is this mission? The answer is, I don't think they knew. Finally, in Season of the Seraph, the Warmind AI Rasputin has their story picked up again, with returning characters Anna Bray. Her grandfather Clovis, I swear I'm not evil, Bray, a freshly unsavathuned Osiris drinking his Nesquik tea, and the ever-looming threat of Xivu Arath, who apparently is stuck in traffic. Along with the all-powerful seasonal grid, Season of the Seraph brought a new competitive rework to PvP, introducing a pseudo-ranked system, which honestly is the exact same thing as before. They did give us a returning favorite, the Rose Hand Cannon. Also, this ranked isn't really ranked. It's still using skill-based matchmaking instead of ranked-based matchmaking. So if you've already played competitive Crucible before, the hidden MMR will make it very hard skill-based. Nothing really changed. Once you sweat, you must continue to sweat. But at least there's a great reward for achieving max rank, right? Oh, come on, please. Nope, nothing special. just a symbol that vaguely looks like the previous ranks, and a gun we had all the way back in the Season of Opulence. As Season of the Seraph would continue, Bungie would actually get into overdrive and make some changes that the community had been requesting. They started rapid firing a bunch of changes right before Lightfall. Maybe some of the community feedback is finally being heard from all the way back in the Shadowkeep and Beyond Light days. But this is the game. It will take a long time to develop a lot of changes. Season of the Seraph would actually end off pretty decently. The activity was much better than activities before it. It made some decent changes in some of the storylines. There's a dog, and the exotic mission is fantastic, even though I hate that it's going to be going away. Overall, Season of the Seraph felt like a really good season among a bunch of stinker seasons, but the real changes won't come until Lightfall, which as of recording this video has got a couple of trailers and some good promotional material, but so far it looks about par for the course for the rest of the years of Destiny. It will take until the middle of the year next year for Bungie to evolve the seasonal format. And I start to think that maybe the seasons are what's holding back Destiny. While the major expansions innovate, the seasons seem to just be there just to be there. And it's made a year of mediocre seasons feel just downright terrible. I'm not saying this to dump on Destiny harder than others have. And there has been some positives added throughout the year. But it's clear to see in the seasonal model that Bungie's offerings have bled the life out of the game and the community. I don't even know how they can begin to fix this. I don't even really think they want to. Bungie is a capital B business, recently acquired for billions with a B, more than 3 of those B's in fact, and had over 1 million pre-orders for the Witch Queen. Why should they change their strategy when the money seems to keep coming in? And despite the seasonal fatigue, the return rate of players at weekly reset keeps in the positive, and not a lot of games can say that right now. Back in his GDC presentation earlier this year, Justin Truman explained the motivation that caused Bungie to rethink their strategy towards the seasonal model that we have today. Anger is not the opposite of loving a game. Loving and hating a game are like 2 degrees off from each other, and they both come from passion, from people who are highly engaged. The opposite of loving a game, the thing that will kill your game, is apathy. Maybe apathy is the best way to sum up the position the community finds itself in right now. Maybe apathy is all that's left after a year that promised big and delivered more of the same. Maybe apathy is the reason Joe Blackburn took to Twitter to respond that the team was looking at shaking up the seasonal model sometime next year, citing development scheduling as the reason for more drastic changes that couldn't be made sooner. But for now, it looks like Bungie will keep building their train station for seasonal arrivals coming and going throughout the year. They will arrive on time with the same formula, carry broken systems and bugs that may never get fixed, and before you know it, a new version will be here ready for your attention. If Bungie keeps building their train station, it looks like a lot of Guardians are gonna start taking the bus. One more thing Justin Truman presented at the GDC Vault that really stuck with me. Bungie's old motto was, "We make games we want to play." Now, their new motto, "We create worlds that inspire friendship." So, Witch Queen, did it make Destiny worse? Yes and no. In a lot of ways, the heart of what makes Destiny a great game only grew this year, with an incredible main story campaign, an innovative raid, new dungeons and loot, and even the return of the king. But in more ways, the experience of actually playing the game, and especially the seasonal content, became exceedingly uninteresting. So bad, in fact, a lot of players' anger has freezed into apathy. It hurts to look forward into Lightfall next year and feel worried about where we will be at the end of 2023. And as the Witch Queen chapter of Destiny 2 closes, it's sad to say that it made the game worse. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.